Today, I decided to give you guys a ranking of the Nosferatu films. This is a series of films that began in the 1920s with the original film Nosferatu and has been remade 3 times. There's several films and TV shows that use the name Nosferatu to some degree, but I'm only including the ones that are directly related in some sort to the original films. There's also a film that almost made the list called Nosferatu in Venice. It's essentially a spiritual sequel to the Werner Herzog film starring Klaus Kinski, but it's a sequel in name only and doesn't really connect to that film. Although I did watch it before making this ranking, I decided it wasn't really part of the film series, so I decided not to include it here. The first film was essentially a knockoff of the story Dracula, but it changed a lot to where it basically made it its own story. That film became a cult classic over the years and spawned 3 remakes. So without further ado, I decided to give you guys my ranking from worst to best, starting with Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror 2023 remake. This film was kind of an interesting oddity. It's essentially a remake of the 1922 film that tries to be not only accurate in terms of visuals, meaning that not only does it use actual film cells from the original film overlaced with green screen of the new actors, but it also is probably the most faithful to that 1922 film. It's an interesting kind of experiment, but I think it doesn't quite work. The film has a very cheap look to it, and I wasn't really a fan of how they handled the character of Hutter. This time around, he's the most unlikable. He's just kind of a dick this time around, even going as far as to cheat on his wife with a gypsy girl that he meets. Considering the fact that they were going for a very close adaptation with this one, I don't know why they would even add such a unlikable character trait to him. But apart from that, the film just had a very flat look, a lot of really bad green screen effects that belong on an early 2000s sci-fi channel movie. Doug Jones is the high point of the film as Count Orlok, and I really do like his work in the Guillermo del Toro films such as Hellboy, Shape of Water. Heck, I even liked him in the Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer movie. And while Doug is trying his best as Count Orlok, it just kind of comes across as a imitation of what Max Schreck was doing in the original film, and this film doesn't really have its own legs. I do appreciate what they were trying to do here. There's not a whole lot of films that try to completely recapture the look of another film, but as far as remakes go, it's just the most underwhelming. It's not a god-awful film, but it's really more of an experiment than it is an actual film, I would say. It doesn't really work for me, but I do think that they are trying their best here, and it's a nice homage to the original, but really nothing more. Up next, we have the 1979 Werner Herzog film, Nosferatu, the Vampire. I do like this one, but I do have some problems with it. For one, I don't like how they call him Count Dracula this time around, and they even refer to certain characters by their book names, such as Van Helsing as well. I get by 1979 that the rights issues were cleared up, so they can just use the name Count Dracula. But considering the fact that they're remaking the original film and not making a Dracula movie, even though there is much inspiration, obviously, you would think that they would just call the character Count Orlok and call the main character Hutter. But despite that, there's not a whole lot of problems that I have with this film. I think that Kinski plays a really great version of Orlok, which I'll just call him from this point forward because he's just not Dracula. I think this film has some very interesting cinematography. Some of the shots are just really gorgeous, and I like the look of Count Orlok's castle, as well as the old-timey looking European streets that we see in several different scenes. And although Kinski's great in the role of Orlok, I do think that Bruno Ganz leaves something to be desired as this film's version of Hutter. He's fine in the first half of the film, and I do think he's a decent protagonist, but in the second half of the film, he's essentially lost his mind after his encounter with Orlok, and he doesn't really have much of a character past that point. However, this does lead to a slight improvement over the original film by giving his wife more agency and even giving her more to do. Hell, there's even a scene where she goes out and tries to hunt down Orlok by herself, and although her efforts aren't successful, you can tell she's actually more of a protagonist this time around and much stronger than the character from the original film. I also really enjoy the way they handle the plague in this version, where it shows the people basically just losing their minds. There's even a scene where people are having a last supper, and they say, well, we've all caught the plague, we might as well enjoy our last meal. It's also kind of funny because none of them are coughing or seem sick, but it works for the shot. Although I do really like Kinski's performance as Orlok, his assistant, Renfield, in this version is also pretty annoying. But apart from that, there's not really many problems that I have with the film. I think it's a pretty good recreation of the original film with its own kind of unique 1970s touch. Definitely worth watching, although I do have to say that the ending is a little bit more dour than the other versions. It's still a pretty damn good movie. Coming in at number 2 is the 1922 original Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror. If I could describe this movie in one word, it would be efficient. What I love about this film is that there's basically no fat on it. It is just get in, get out, to the point very quickly. If you're not a fan of silent films, I can see you maybe not liking this one, but if you can give it a chance, I find this to be a very entertaining movie. I really love this version of Hutter. He's fun loving and energetic, and you can tell he doesn't really take this Nosferatu stuff seriously. Heck, he even finds the book describing the vampire, he ends up throwing it on the ground and laughing because it's so ridiculous. I also think that Max Schreck is magnificent as Count Orlok, and he really gives this like creepy kind of demeanor. All the actors who play Orlok do bring something different to the role, but this version is just iconic. I love the creepy stare he does, the long ears he has on the side of his head, the pointy teeth in the front. It all just works to make a great version of what essentially was a knockoff of Count Dracula. But he did such a good job that he basically made a new character, which was its own thing. If I would say there's any downside to the movies, I would say it's that the side characters don't really have much to do. Like, for instance, the friends who are watching over Ellen in the movie don't even have any real dialogue. And I think that, for the most part, the film makes up for that, though, with being very entertaining, fast paced, and having interesting main characters and a great villain. It's creepy, it's very expressionist, it's really great. It's a film of its time, and they really just delivered with this one. If you don't like silent films, I could maybe see you not liking the movie, but if you do enjoy silent films, this is a great film and one that I definitely recommend. But my favorite has to be the new kid on the block, and that would have to be Nosferatu. Directed by Robert Eggers and starring Nicholas Hoult as Hutter and Lily Rose Depp as Ellen and Bill Skarsgård's Count Orlok. I was really captivated by the performance, and he really does steal every scene that he's in. This has the same basic story as the original film and its remakes, but it basically adds more agency to all the characters, fleshes things out more, gives everyone more to do, and you actually have characters who are not even characters in the original film more fleshed out here. The film is beautifully shot and has amazing direction, a dark, haunting atmosphere, and an ending that is not only creepy and really out there, but also poignant and kind of sad and gives you some great resolution. It's everything I want in a gothic period piece horror film, and everyone here delivers. Robert Eggers made an amazing film, and I think this is the best film of his career so far. The original film definitely had some shortcomings due to the technology and filmmaking techniques at the time, but I still think it's a great film. And even though this one is my favorite, it wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that original. I think they're a great companion piece to each other, but this one just takes the cake by a slight edge, and I really do love the remake of Nosferatu. It's definitely the most violent, it's definitely the most sexual, and it's definitely the most disturbing, but it also is the most entertaining, and the one that I think is the best of the four Nosferatu films. Well, that's my list. I do thank you all for watching. I would have had this one out to you sooner, but I had to basically rewatch all the films again because I hadn't seen the original one in a long time. The Kinski one I hadn't seen since I was a teenager, and I'd never seen the 2023 version, and I find them all to be entertaining. I think the 2023 version is definitely the weakest, but it does have its own merits as well. If you haven't seen these films, I highly recommend them. Thank you all for watching, and peace out.